everyone. Welcome to my podcast and my YouTube channel. Today we have with us Army Major General Mark Graham. Thank you so much for your service first, sir, and thank you for
Thanks,
being
Paul.
here with us. Well, Mark is one of us. Unfortunately, he has lost a loved one to suicide, and he's also become a mental health advocate after that. Mark has had huge losses. He lost his son Kevin to suicide. And then 7.5 months later, his other son, Jeffrey, he was killed in Iraq. So we're going to talk about grief today and how his family survived. And that's the word really for that. I mean, how do you survive the loss of two kids in less than a year? So we're going to talk about the family dynamics, how each one of you, he has a daughter and a wife. So how each one of you dealt with the grief and the compounded grief of two kids in one family. So Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Paula.
And we'll also talk about your beautiful work at Vets for Warriors. He's the director for Vets for Warriors, and we're going to talk about the support network at the end. But I would love to talk about Kevin first. So in retrospect, we know that when we look back, we see so many things, Mark, that we didn't see in the past. So I'm wondering how you see your son's death now, from how it felt and what it looked like and all that mess that comes with suicide. So what is the difference between then and now?
Yeah, thanks, Paula. Well, first, thank you for doing this for the podcast and the YouTube channel to help Carol and I and Melanie and so many others. And our hearts go out to everyone that's listening or watching, and we're so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And the pain and grief you're going through and will continue to go through. I mean,
Mhm.
we lost Kevin in June of 2003. So 19 years ago feels like yesterday.
Mhm.
Many mornings I still get up and think it's all a bad dream or someone else's story, because it's still hard to believe that it's our story. So when we first lost Kevin, our world was over with one phone call. Jeffrey called us to tell us.
So his brother called.
I was stationed in South Korea
Okay.
at the time, so Carol was with me in South Korea, and Jeffrey called and told Carol and I. I answered the phone, and he told me, and then I told Carol. And so our world was over. We came back to the States, and within 24 hours, we were back in the States, and just broken. Just didn't know what was next. We were, as a family. I think one thing that we knew Kevin was struggling. We knew he had depression. We just, and I say it over and over. We knew he was sad. We didn't know you could die from being too sad. I mean, we just didn't know enough about it. Certainly back then. There's so many more resources now and information, which is helpful. But if you lose someone to suicide or any other way, you weren't aware of it either. You never think, oh, this could happen to my family. But it can, and it's real. And I think the big change for us was it was a real illness, and we didn't understand that at the time. We knew he was sad. He was on depression medication. We thought, okay, he's on some medication, that'll help him.
So he's been treated, right? You think, oh, he's getting better?
He never got treated at probably a high enough level. He got some help. So he was on medication. He was embarrassed that he was on the medication. I think the stigma was part of it. I think we were part of the stigma. I mean, even though we didn't say anything to him, I think he felt that way.
Yeah.
He didn't want anyone to know. His brother and sister lived in the same apartment, and they did not know he was on depression medication until someone happened to see a wrapper in the trash can in his bedroom and said something. And that really was hard for Kevin. He was crushed by that. But we saw him 30 days before he died. He was in the best physical shape I've ever seen him in. He said, Dad, I'm working out twice a day. I'm running. I'm in the gym. In his closet, we found a stack of Men's Health magazines, dog-eared, where he tried to find what are natural ways to raise his serotonin to keep him healthy. So when we first lost him, we were devastated by the loss, and we still are. But I think one of the keys for us is we never blamed each other. We never blamed each other for for Kevin's death. We all loved Kevin. He was wonderful, and he had an illness, and I mean, we each blame ourselves, I think, in a way that we didn't get him the help he needed. Even though he was on medication, we didn't understand it. So we didn't talk about it with him as much. He would say things to us that would think, wow, he's really sad. And Carol would hand me the phone, or I would hand her the phone back. And, we try to, Kevin, well, what do you need to do? Get, drop out of school, whatever you need to do. And he said, no, Dad, I'd be a quitter.
See, even the words now, right? When you listen to them,
yeah,
that's the shame associated with being sick.
Yeah. So he didn't want to be seen as a quitter, and Kevin wanted to be an Army doctor, and but his grades, and we didn't know his grades were slipping, but he told his mom one night right before he died, he told us, well, I guess not right before he died, but before we knew, one of the last calls we had with him, he said his brain's not working anymore.
Wow.
And of course, that's something that we now look back and think, wait, what? I mean, that, so we should have got him to a higher level of care. I think, he was being seen at the clinic at the university, which is, fine, but that's, he needed more than that, I think. And he probably needed to take some off, take a knee, maybe stop school for a semester or something, but take a knee and get better, get help. And you always wish you knew now, what you didn't know then. So I just hope those listening and those watching, if you've got someone in your family that's struggling, it's serious and it's real. Do not wait. Get them the right care now. Please don't wait, because it's serious and it's real, and it is an illness. I mean, sometimes we try to characterize it as not as an illness, but something else. But it's an illness. Depression is real.
Yeah. I was looking at you talking about the phone call, and it brought me back, of course, memories of my sister calling me and telling me about my dad. But what I was paying attention, and I noticed that and that's what, like you said, grief is constant, right? It's here, it changes its shape and intensity, but it's here and it's real. When you were talking about the call, it felt like it was that day for you. The confusion, the shock, you were like, you didn't even know how to refer to that day. And that's what it feels like, isn't it? And how it affects. Do you remember that day? Because I only remember the call, and that's it. And then after that, the day is a blank for me.
I do remember that day.
You do?
Sadly, it's one I'll never forget, but I do remember the call. It was 10 o'clock at night for us in Korea. Because we were different time zones. So it was in the morning in Kentucky, but it was nighttime in Korea. It was 10 o'clock at night. Carol and I were in bed. And when Jeff called, I told Carol just rolled out of bed onto the floor. So I immediately started worrying about Carol, and then
of course
worrying about Jeffrey and Melanie, who were still back in Kentucky. Carol has, some family in Kentucky, so they were able to be there immediately to support Melanie and Jeffrey. So that helped to know that they were there. But then we were back very fast. I mean, and so but I do remember that call. I'll never forget it. It's one of the two worst days of my life.
Yeah. And, and it sounds like Kevin was really making an effort. When you said he was in the best physical shape of his life, I immediately thought he was self-medicating with exercise.
He was. I mean, he was also drinking too. I mean, at nights and stuff, he was drinking too. I mean, and I think that's part of the way to mask the pain. But he was raising the serotonin level as best he could. I mean, when I hugged him, we flew back to the States in May of 2003 because Jeffrey was graduating from the University of Kentucky with a degree in engineering. And then the next day, I commissioned him the day prior into the Army as a second lieutenant. And I grabbed Kevin and hugged him, and he was solid as could be. And I told him, Kevin, you're in great shape. So physically, things were great for him, but inside he was struggling so hard. And 30 days later, he was gone. He'd taken his life, and that fast. I mean, that fast. So we think he stopped taking his medication because he didn't want the Army to know when he signed into the leadership camp.
Yeah, and that's the deceiving thing about mental illness, isn't it? You look at someone who's, oh, they look great. You look great, you're great, right?
Yeah.
But it's just the outside, but you can be just,
It's the mask.
yeah.
It's the mask. Kevin was, he was funny. He was smart and bright, funny. I mean, but oftentimes, we didn't see him. I didn't see him in those periods when he was so sad.
Mhm.
And he could, because he hid it. He didn't want anyone, to know, because he was embarrassed by it. And I think he thought it was a character flaw or something, and not, and just we thought it was just a sad feeling, but it's so real. And that's one of the key things we learned, and we try to tell others is, one is we want Kevin's life to have meaning.
Mhm.
That Kevin, sadly, our story might be able to help someone else to work through their grief, or to help prevent a suicide, just by knowing, get someone to care, get them to care, talk to young people. I mean, we sit around the kitchen table, and I'm not sure if we do it as much as we used to years ago, but we do talk about maybe medical history of our families, but do we talk about mental health history? And it's important
Yeah,
to
we
talk.
only talk about diabetes, heart problems, right? Hypertension.
Exactly right. Exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. When I went to school, and one of the things that they make us do is what they call a genogram. So
Mm.
genogram is like a family tree, except that you really dig into it, and you talk about addictions in your family. And you have to, like, I had to call my parents, my uncles, and say, do you have any kids with addictions? What kind of addiction? So you can see the family map of addictions, relationship patterns, communication patterns, mental health, any depression, or any kind of mental illness. We have to kind of chart it on a page, so that you have, like you said, it's not about the physical disease, right? How about what about all the rest that we forget, because we just don't.
Yeah, it's the invisible wounds, right? It's the invisible wounds, and not just the invisible wounds of war, but the invisible wounds of life.
Mm-hmm.
And being an illness, I mean, if there was a way you could visibly see someone struggling with depression or any kind of mental illness, then it would be different. But since you can't see it, it's so hard for the person that's dealing with it, and for others. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
could see it, you'd say, hey, something's wrong. Let's go get you help.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so hard. So we have to learn to pick up on the words or things people say, or their behavior. If they're change their behavior, we need to notice that. And it's not easy to talk to them about it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure. I think everyone knows now. I think it's hard to talk to someone about it, because they sometimes, I think, they're in denial too. No, they don't
And
want
it's
to
hard
believe
to
it.
hear, right? Are you
It is.
ready to hear?
All right. All right.
Right. It's not just asking. I mean, what's going to be even your reaction? How are you going to? So you have this. One of the things, I have a course on how to help suicidal people, and one of the things I said, before you talk to them, you have to do some soul searching. How are you going to deal with the fact that they might say, yeah, I'm thinking about suicide? What are your views, personal views on suicide? What are you going to say next? You have to think about these things before you even ask the
Yeah.
questions.
Great point. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great point.
yeah, because depending on your tone of voice, the question can be so different. You can say, listen, I can see you're struggling, you're not doing well. How can I help you? Are you okay? That's one question, right? The other one is, oh, you're not doing okay. Are you thinking about suicide? You're not, right? That's the same question, but very different outputs, right?
All right. All right. Very, very different. Very different.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you typically ask somebody, how you doing? Are you doing okay? Almost every time someone say,
So yeah, I'm fine.
yeah, I'm fine. All good.
Yeah.
All good.
Have you read Andrew Solomon's book, The
Uh,
Midday Demon?
no.
It's one of the best, Andrew Solomon, and he has a wonderful book on depression. I interviewed him for my book, and he told me a story of he calls him the ex-friend, because he decided, after he struggled with suicidal ideation and depression and all of that, and when he decided to turn his life around, and one of the things he decided was, I'm never going to say I'm okay if I'm not okay, right? So this friend of his comes to him and goes, oh, how are you doing, Andrew? And he goes, I'm not doing well. I'm been getting treatment for depression. I was really struggling a few. And he starts to tell, the story, the reality of his life. And the friend just goes, oh, it's so good to see you, and just leaves. I mean, that's what I mean. But how are you going to react? It's not just a question.
Right.
Is are you ready to take that in, right?
Yeah. Right. And
So
what are you
and
gonna do?
he's
If they tell you you're
yeah,
struggling, what do you do?
yeah,
Well, you get them to help.
and he said, yeah, that became my ex-friend immediately, because what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Mark, you said something that I want to go back to. You said you talked about the shame, and that Kevin had, you think that he might have stopped medication because he didn't know the army to know. So that's one of the things that I'm sure that with the work that you're doing now with Vets for Warrior, I'm sure you tackle that subject all the time. But how do you think the army or the military culture is looking at mental illness now? Do you see any, because we know that, the tough it up, and that's like the profile of the military training, right? And for obvious reasons, you have to tough it up if you're going to be a soldier, but that affects everything else. As you said, I mean, Kevin might have been ashamed of taking medication for depression and say, I don't want the army to know because otherwise I'm not fit, right? So how can you navigate between these two realities?
It's hard.
Mm.
Very hard. And I think the military's done some good work in this area. There's much more work to do, and it's got to be consistent across the board. It can't be one installation. The environment or the culture there is one way that's accepting and helping and getting, it's okay to come forward and get help. But then when the Army or any of the services move you to another installation or another service location, the environment's different there. That really will confuse people. So we got to be consistent. And I think it's hard to be consistent in huge organizations, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means it's hard to do. So I think we got to be consistent, not just in the military, but in civilian life as well, and employers and everyone. One is if you have an employee that's struggling with depression and they get help, they will be a better employee. I mean, not only for them, but for for the organization. It's everyone win. I mean, everyone doesn't win. Everyone is better. I mean, the individual better, they feel better, their life is better, that they'll probably do better work. I mean, everything's better if we get people help. I oftentimes, when I speak, I'll ask people, if I told you I was on blood pressure medicine, would that bother you? And I said, sure, it probably wouldn't bother most of you. You're like, oh, good, I'm glad you're getting the care you need. What if I told you I was on depression medication? Would you react differently? And I said, don't answer the question, but I know many of you would. Many of you would look at me differently if I told you that, compared to, oh, I'm on blood pressure medicine. Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad you're getting the care you need. We need to make the conversation the same. So if you're on depression medication, the answer should be, oh, I'm glad you're getting the help you need. How you doing? Is that going okay?
Yeah.
But we just haven't gotten there yet. I mean, I think we've made some progress, and I think what you're doing is helping. Absolutely. But I do think there's still work to do, and that's one reason Carol and I have spoken out and gone, because we wanted the loss of our sons to have meaning, and Kevin's, and our kids are very close. They were very close. I mean, you move them around the world together, they get close.
Yeah, of course. They have so it's what they have, right? The friends come and go, because with the military life you move a lot. Right. And that's what you have, you two brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah.
Kevin, let's talk about grief within the family. We know that for some family, it's a huge, I mean, grief is a struggle period, but when it's suicide, it comes in with even more, I think, some peculiarities that come with suicide, like the shame, the possible blaming, the questions, the what ifs, and all the shoulds. And how was it for your family? How did you navigate the different styles or ways and processes of grieving within the family?
Yeah, we all processed it differently. We all grieve differently. I think oftentimes we look at parents, but we kind of forget the siblings. Melanie really struggled too, in a different way than we did. I mean, she dropped out of school because it was just too hard. I mean, but that was okay at that point. That was okay with us, because we knew she needed a break. It was too much, and we understood it. So Carol went to every support group she could find. She was connected to people and everything else. I was the opposite. I threw myself into work. I didn't go to support groups. I would be home alone with my grief, and
Wow.
it was very different. And so I think for me, it's important to know that that's okay. Everyone grieves differently, and don't try to make another loved one or a friend or someone grieve the way you think they should be grieving. Let them grieve the way it works for them. But I think the key is to grieve.
Mhm.
You have to grieve. If you don't grieve, you can't move forward. I mean, I don't know how long it was after we lost Kevin, and then of course Jeffrey, that after we lost Kevin, I thought I should never be allowed to be happy again the rest of my life. How can I ever think I should be able to smile or be happy again? And it took a long time before I could ever laugh again. I mean, I just couldn't do it. I thought, who are you to be able to laugh again? And Carol felt the same way. I mean, that you weren't. And then eventually, because of faith, family, and friends, as I say, faith, family, and friends are what got us through and continue to get us through our grief and our loss, and each other. And I think the other important thing is we never blamed each other.
Oh, good.
We
Yeah.
never blamed the other about, you shoulda, you didn't, or we never did that. We were always there to support each other, and and be there for each other and whatever they needed in their grief, and not to interfere with it, to let them grieve the way they grieved and be supportive. And I think that was very key, that we didn't blame. I think oftentimes you see blame. Carol and I just celebrated 45 years being married,
Wow.
and which is a long time, but
It is. Yeah.
it is. But 19 years after we lost Kevin, I think many people, it's a struggle to stay together, and I think part of it's because of blame. So I'd encourage people, that doesn't go anywhere if you blame someone else. I mean, it doesn't bring anyone back.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal was to help others know that there is hope. There is help, to get help for people, individuals out there, so you don't ever have to go through it. But I think the other key thing is we have to be careful that, I mean, everyone's going through something, right? I mean, everyone, either personally or someone else, or a coworker, so everyone's going through something. Don't compare grief. Don't compare your journey and what you're going through to others, but be there for others, and know, like you said, know what to do if they do say they need help. What do you do? Be ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You said that there was no blaming, but even within the different styles of grieving, there is some, she seemed, I remember I interviewed a couple and they never blamed each other, but one of them would tell me, yeah, but I would get so angry with him because he wouldn't talk to me. And he would say, yeah, and I was so angry with her because she was out with friends. How can you be out with friends? We just lost a kid. So even these differences, they can bring some very challenging emotions and
You're right.
communication,
And I think
dynamics.
that's exactly a great point. There's no quote perfect way to deal with it. There's no right way. I think you got to find your own path, but I think you have to walk very gently on that path, because we're all very fragile at this point. When we lost Kevin, we were very, very fragile. All of us in our own way.
Yeah.
We were fragile. I am an Army guy, right? And
Oh yeah.
I was broken.
Yeah.
I didn't know
You didn't
what
know
to
how to
do.
deal with it, did you?
No,
I'm sure,
no.
because it was just not in the culture, right?
Right.
Yeah, I know, because looking back at my dad was a military man too. He loved the army. He was in the army for 14 years. And you looked at my dad and you knew, even though he had left the service, you knew that he was a military person. And my dad would not externalize anything.
Yeah.
Everything was always great. Yeah. And then he was drinking every day, right?
Yeah. And I did get help. I did finally go get help, but it was really hard to do that. But because Melanie and Carol both said, I wasn't sleeping. And when I went back to work after we lost Kevin, it took a while. I went back to work, and I had a very important job at a military installation. But I just wasn't sleeping. And Melanie and Carol both said, Dad, and Mark, you really need to go get help. So I finally went and got help. But I'll tell you what, that first step is really hard. But once I took the first step, I realized it was the right step, and I did need help, and I was able to start sleeping, and it changed. It helped change me to be able to sleep. So I think, and I don't think it's just harder, quote, for men than it is women. I think it's just individuals. It's some people it's harder to go get help. Some people aren't. They're just not able to just, yeah, I need help, and it was hard to do. But once I did, I was glad I did. So I encourage you, if you're listening, if you're watching, please get help for you or someone else. Take them to get help, or if you're struggling and haven't gone, go get help. There is help and hope. We live one day at a time. I still do. I still live one day. It's still hard for me to believe we've lost both our sons. My mind still can't comprehend it. And you would think, it's been a long time. Or when someone says, gosh, aren't you past that now?
Oh.
And we don't have people say that to us now, but early on, a few months after or so, people would, say things like that to Carol more than me. And no, we're not. Yeah.
Well,
So when
Mark,
people say, I think that's the other thing that's important for everyone to know, for me, is when people say things and they seem inappropriate, it's probably because they don't know what to say. But I would rather had somebody say something to me that really wasn't the right thing to say than not talk to me. And we had some that they didn't say a thing, like they never did acknowledge or say anything. And that really was hard. Like,
the silence kills you, doesn't it?
It does. It's like, God, I can't believe you're not, but I think it's because they don't know what to say. So they say nothing, and saying nothing's worse.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would rather someone at least try, right? I often say that if you don't know what to say, say that. Say, listen,
that's exactly right.
I don't know what to say. Right,
I have no words.
I have no words. Really, there is nothing I can say that will help you. I just want to know that I'm here, whatever you need. Period. Right. You don't have to have the perfect sentence, but acknowledge the loss.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Mark, I make a point on my podcast to give tools to my listeners. So I want to go back to the support and the family dynamics, because you gave a great example of support. Your daughter and your wife, they came to you, they were paying attention. And of course, we know that after suicide happens, everybody's highly aware of everybody after that in the family, right? Very attuned to their mental state, emotional state. And they came to you and they said, Dad, you need help. This is something that I did for my dad months before he died. I could tell he wasn't okay. And I said, Dad, you need to see someone. So he did see, but again, didn't do the treatment because of the shame and all of that. But anyway, you gave a great example of support. I want to help those who are listening and they're saying, wow, I'm struggling with my husband or with my wife or within the family. What does support look like? Can you give another example that can help them to navigate the grief within the family? Because it might be sometimes you're just drifting away and you don't know how to pull yourselves back together.
I think contact a friend, and maybe a friend can reach them, an Army buddy, another military veteran, a friend, someone who's worked in their field, someone they've known or played sports with growing up or went to school with. Going up that you recall that you think they're close to. And now that would be putting something on someone too. Say, hey, I'm worried about my dad, I'm worried about my son or my brother or sister, but I know you have a connection with them. Would you be willing to reach out and just talk to them?
Yes, a great point.
And see if they would. And I think, because you never know who's going to connect. You never know who's going to be the one that makes the connection.
Yeah, and also if you are struggling within like the marriage, do you have anything that you can think of that would help?
Yeah, I think if you're struggling with the marriage, I think it's we didn't go through that. We luckily did not go through that, but I think many families do. Sadly, it ends up in divorce and everything. I think. Again, I think somebody else can intervene. Another couple that knows you, another friend or family member that knows you, and can even say, you know, I know you all are struggling together. Have you gone to see someone together? Have you gotten some help together? Just to, even though they might not want to do it or they might not do it, but someone saying something to them. One is, sometimes I think you don't even realize, you know, you can't see yourself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just someone else mention it, it might be like, wow, it's that obvious. Wow, maybe we do need to get some help together. Maybe we do need to work on this together. Because as I always tell people, you know, you were there together before kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, get back, try to do that again, you know, and it doesn't all, you know, I understand it doesn't always work, but I think someone else saying something to you sometimes helps, because it's not you talking to each other, it's someone else saying they see it too.
Yeah, yeah. It's great that you mentioned that, because Terry Cheney, that I just interviewed, my listeners might have listened to her interview already, and she was the one who introduced you to me. And she told me that one of the things that she has done in the past, because she has bipolar disorder, and she knows that sometimes, as you said, she can't tell that she's cycling. So she has a couple of friends that have her consent to say, listen, you're cycling, you're doing this or you're doing that. Here are the signs and the symptoms, because of course it has to be someone you trust.
Sure.
There has to be confidentiality, of course, but she has a few friends that will tell her, and she'll know, okay, it's time to just pay attention and do something.
That's great.
Yeah. Mark, you said that you never blamed each other. Did it happen from outside, though? I mean, how did your religious community react? How did your friends react, family? Because we know that some weird things happen when suicide.
Yeah, I think the religious piece was tough for a lot of people of how to handle that. And I think it was hard for a lot of people we knew, friends and family and everyone. I think that is a tough part. I think, you know, as a nation, as a culture, we've made progress in that area, because people are starting to realize this is an illness. So it's real. So you know, if you die of something else, then, you know, people don't say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you died of, you know, heart disease or heart attack or something. I'm sorry you lost someone. But when it's suicide, they think differently. So I think we've made a turn a little bit in that way. But I think that and others just I think don't recognize, they see it as weakness. Like, you know, he was weak, you know, and you know, we said in the past, you know, if you're tough and your kids end up doing really well, they don't have an illness or something like this, it's like, wow, you know, you did a great job, you know. But if something, you know, if your kids are struggling, it's like, hey, you didn't do something right, and not realizing, yeah, we didn't do something right. We didn't get him to the right level of care. We got him to some care, but we didn't know enough about it to really continue to follow up and all that with him, and do that. So I think, I mean, I think that's a tough one, because people really reacted different, and they definitely reacted different to Kevin's death than Jeffrey's death. Jeffrey died a hero. Jeffrey was in combat, was killed by
totally different, right?
Saved his man, very different. You know, his name was in, you know, was in the newspaper. People were sending us things and everything else because of that. And you know, Jeffrey served, and he sadly died, you know, serving his country. But Kevin's death was hard on us, you know, not harder than Jeffrey's death. I mean, they were both hard. I'm not going to compare them.
It's hard, yeah, but it's different, yeah.
But it was very different how people reacted, because people didn't, you know, many of our friends would just put their arms around us, and it was like they're there. Many did not know what to say or what to do, because it's so different. It's so different. So I think it's important. The more we talk about it, the more we learn about it and understand, then I think the better will be that people can help others when they're grieving, and not look at them like, you know, it's a sideways look, like, whoa, how can that happen? How can that be?
Yeah, the body language is different too, right?
Right. Very
Even
much
if they
so.
don't say anything, the way
Right.
they look at you,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so much judgment. And yeah, you just made this parallel between his death and Kevin's death and Jeffrey's death. And there is this useless, empty, that doesn't really help this discussion about suicide. Of suicide, is it an act of bravery or are you a coward, right?
Mm.
But as you said, people usually think about suicide as, oh, he gave up or she gave up. But then you have Jeffrey, who fought for his country, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course the reaction will be different.
Kevin, as I mentioned, Kevin was running every day, working out. And sometimes I'll even say, Kevin was running for his life.
Mm-hmm.
He was running
Yeah.
for his life. He was trying to get his serotonin level up,
Yeah.
doing all the things, he was trying to eat healthy and do the things that he could do to keep his serotonin level up naturally, because he was ashamed of being on the medication.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's the stigma. And again, I think we were part of that stigma. I mean, I do. Even though we didn't say things to him directly, I think he probably felt some of that he didn't want to let us down. He didn't want to let us down. He didn't want to let anyone down, and he was embarrassed. And so I think he was literally running for his life, trying to do all he
Yeah.
could himself, stay alive.
Yeah, and that's one of the unfairness in the narrative about suicide too, Mark, that we often think about the moment someone dies of suicide, it's all they remember, right? Who is Kevin? Oh, it's the boy who gave up, or it's the boy who died of suicide, took his own life. That becomes their whole identity. You forget all the rest of who they were, but you also forget how long did they fight against this, as you said, right? Because they didn't want to hurt you. And yeah, you only think about that moment when they couldn't take it anymore. But how about the many years that they had to endure it? Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, and I think we talk about family, but I think the other aspect of this is friends. The impact it had on Kevin's friends.
Mm.
I mean, he was in an apartment complex. They had a lot of friends. The impact it's had on his friends has been, and even those who weren't in school with him, and friends he had from high school and before, the impact on them has been huge. I mean,
Really? How
because
so?
well, they all loved Kevin. I mean, you couldn't know Kevin and not love. I mean, he was just like that. I mean, and so they were all devastated by it. And I think many of them, like, how did they even? I'm sure they haven't. Some of them have said it to us, but I mean, so many of them, I think, are probably thinking the same thing. How did we not see this? How did we not see this coming, or didn't do? So they felt guilt too. I mean, they felt, guilt too, and everything. So I think it's family, but it's also friends. I mean, and others, coworkers, and all those. So other students and everyone who knew Kevin, they were shocked, right? They were just like, no, they in disbelief actually, because they didn't see it coming. And then when you look back, you might see pieces here and there, but you didn't put it together. So I think that's the hard part, is put the puzzle together before, before, and it's easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah. Before we talk about Jeffrey, I want to acknowledge Melanie, because as you said, we often forget the siblings.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we talk about her and her grief, because I want to honor, and I know that she was the one who found him. So that's an added layer of trauma. So how is Melanie doing?
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's amazing woman, and she's had a rough road, and losing both brothers and everything she's gone through. But she always wanted to be a nurse. She became a nurse, and then she finished school and she became a nurse and continued on schooling, and she's now a nurse practitioner in New York City, and she's helping other people, and that's what she wanted to do all of her life. So she's a mother of 3 wonderful kids and a wife of a great husband and son-in-law. So Melanie's doing well, but I think you have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, and it sounds like she was. I mean, she took some time off school, and
Yeah, and I think that's a process, and it took Melanie a long time to get to the point where she could start thriving again. But it took Carol and I a long time too, to where we could get to that point. Um, and we all did it in different ways. Melanie, you know, she's amazing. And,
Yeah.
I wish I had more. I wish I had a better word. I mean, a stronger word.
But I
Amazing.
can see how proud you are of her, that you can't even find words.
Yeah,
You just
yeah,
can't. Yeah.
yeah.
It's good
And
to
she's the
see that.
sunshine in her days, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I
She
can
gave
see
us hope too.
I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
gave us hope too, and still does.
Yeah. She Well, I'm glad we talked about her, because I lost my brother, not to suicide, kind of suicide. It's one of those things that we don't know, but um yeah, people just don't talk. They talk about the parents. And how about you? I mean, and I saw my brother go in and out of rehab before he died, and it's easier to talk about my dad than it is to talk about my brother.
Mm.
Yeah, it's tough. Anyway, so let's talk about Jeffrey. So I know I saw an interview that you gave, and you talked about Jeffrey, that he was getting ready to be deployed, and then Kevin died, and the army reassessed it and kind of gave him the option. But he came to you and he said, Dad, I need to go. I need to go. And he went to Iraq, right? Do you think that that was part of his grief? I mean, he wanted, because it's painful to be around your family during that time, right? Do you think that was part of his process
Yeah,
to be away and do it on his own?
yeah. I mean, Melanie wanted me to get out of the army right then.
Mhm.
She saw we were at Carol's mother's house in Kentucky, and Melanie said, Dad, there's a house right across over there for sale. Why don't you just get out of the army and live here? Let's just live here.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey and I went for a walk one evening, and we didn't go for walks. I mean, we ran together sometimes, but we didn't go for walks. And while we were on a walk, Jeffrey looked at me in a way I'd never seen him look at me before. And he just stopped walking. He looked at me and said, Dad, I've got to go. And I said, no, you don't have to go. I mean, the army said you could stay and not have to deploy. And he said, Dad, my men are waiting for me. And I said, you don't have any men yet. You're still in officer basic course. You haven't finished school yet for the army. And he said, Dad, my men are waiting for me. They're ready. They need their leader. They're ready for me. And they need me. And so, as a father, I didn't want Jeffrey to go. I mean, I didn't. I need him. I told him, I said, look, I need you. Mom needs you. Melanie needs you. I didn't want him to go. But as a soldier, I understood why he felt like he had to go. And did he go partly because of Kevin? Because he said, Kevin was with me all the time.
Yeah.
So he said, oh, okay, son. But I told him, I said, okay, you go, but you make sure when you go, you bring all those soldiers home. And they all came home, but he and one other soldier, Roger Ling, they were both killed by that IED on the bridge that was detonated by cell phone. But I do think I think maybe part of it was, that he didn't stop from going because he lost his brother. I think part of the reason he was going because of Kevin. He like, okay, I'm going. And so I think the story of Jeffrey calling us that last night. We were talking to Jeffrey every day. He went to Fort Riley, Kansas, to meet up with his unit. His unit was already deployed. He was at Fort Riley getting ready to go to join his unit in Iraq. And we were talking every night. He talked to Carol, and then we talked to me about Army stuff. And the last night before he deployed, he was on the phone with Carol. And he said, Mom, someone's at the door. I've got to go. Carol said, okay. And so we kind of expected him to call back pretty quick. It was hours before. And so we went to bed. We were sad because we really wanted to talk to him the night before he deployed. And he called late and he was crying, and Jeffrey wasn't a crier. He didn't cry much. He didn't show his emotions in that way. And he said, a soldier came to my door and said, are you the lieutenant whose brother killed himself? And Jeffrey said, yeah, I am. And he said, I need to talk to you. So we don't know what all they said. We just know when Jeffrey talked to us, he said, I talked to this guy a lot differently than I would have if Kevin hadn't died by suicide. And he told this young soldier, don't be like my brother. Don't take your life. Don't do it. Let's get help. Because you'll be missed more than you'll ever know, the impact you'll have. And it's important that you stay alive. So we don't know who that was or whatever happened, but Jeff asked Carol separately and then me. And he said, there are a lot of Kevins out there. He goes, Mom, promise me you and Dad will keep talking and telling the story so that, all the other Kevins out there will stay alive. And Carol promised him, he said, please put Dad on the phone. And he asked me to make the same promise. So we did. And we continue to speak out and for all the Kevins out there. Who people, they're out there. And we want to make sure they all get help. And we keep them all because everyone's irreplaceable. No one can be replaced. We're all individuals and, everyone will be lost if we lose you. So we want to keep everyone. That story is burned in my brain. I'll never forget that phone call. And the way it changed Jeffrey. It changed all of us, but the way it changed Jeffrey was dramatic as well.
Really? In what way?
Oh, they were really, they were all three really close. But Jeffrey was really close to his brother. I think when I stop being emotional about it, I'll be in the ground. It's just 19 years ago, and it still affects me the way it does. So I tell people, it's kind of like the ocean. Sometimes the waves just lap up against your ankles, and sometimes the wave just slams you. Because whenever I do one of these, I always say, okay, I'm not going to lose it this time. And I do every time.
You're not losing it, Mark. You're just being human. You're being a father. That's all. And I'm glad you feel comfortable showing your emotions here. Thank you. Because you're actually modeling for my listeners that it's okay.
I tell people, I tell men it's okay to cry. It's okay to hug and it's okay to cry because I hug more than I've ever hugged in my life. I lost my voice because something about just the human touch. It's important.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that modeling. It's really important. And we're talking about also the military culture here, those who are listening. And we know that the rates are much higher for that population. So there's so much risk for suicide. And I'm glad that they're seeing a major colonel here. General. Is it a colonel or general? I always get these things.
General.
Crying because it's okay. He's a father. He lost his son, and of course he's going to cry. He lost 2 sons, and that's unsurmountable. Only parents can even begin to think and to relate to you. So thank you for that. So let's talk about your work with Vets for Warriors. What is it? What is the organization, and how can my listeners get in touch with it?
Sure. So thank you for that. I've been with Vets for Warriors almost 9 years. When I retired from the Army, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wanted to do something to continue in this space, to give back, to help others know there's help out there and hope. And so I wasn't sure what to do. So about a year after I retired from the Army, I got a call about Vets for Warriors to come and work at Vets for Warriors and lead the program. And I did. So been here almost 9 years. Vets for Warriors is it's a peer support line. It's a national line. We hire veterans. We train those veterans to answer the phones live within 30 seconds, 24 hours a day. So we never close. Service members can call, veterans can call, family members can call. If you've ever worn the uniform of our nation's military, you can call the line, or anyone you consider family. And we use family as a broad term. If you say that guy's like a brother to me, okay, he can call too. Anyone can call, and our peers are from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, male and female, and from every era of conflict, from Vietnam forward. You can call, and once you call us, we then talk about a time for us to call you back, so we stay connected as long as you want. You'll see our tagline on the screens: "Discover the power of connection." All about connections. You can go to our website as well and see there. You can do a live chat through our website if you'd rather do that. But we talk to a lot of people. We've been Vets Warriors have been around over 10 years now. So
Mhm.
10 years in last December. So we're coming up on 11 years, over 700,000 contacts and 93 consecutive hours of answering the phones.
Wow.
So if you're out there and you think, I don't want to be the only one that's ever called, you're not. We have a lot of people calling, and everyone's going through something. And so our goal is to be upstream. Our goal at Vets Warriors is call before you get to a point of crisis. Call us early on when you're struggling, no matter what it is, whether it's employment, your relationships, mental health, whatever you're struggling with, call us. If you're having sad feelings, call us. Let's connect. Let's talk.
Mhm.
You'll talk to another veteran who gets it.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm so glad you do that on the other side of the line, it's a veteran that's answering the phone. So you're also giving them some meaning to their lives, right?
Right. And it's a live answer. So you don't get a voicemail, you get a veteran answering the phone. And it's a
Wow.
live call within 30 seconds. And that one is, most people are surprised when someone answers the phone, but then when they find out it's a veteran on the other end, you can almost feel their anxiety go down a little bit. Like, okay,
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
talking to someone else who they know cares and gets it
And
and
they
understands
relate
their life.
to, yeah,
Right.
they relate they relate to the challenges that they go through, the service that they went through, and the lifestyle, all of
Right.
that.
And then we connect you to, then we help connect them to resources. If they're looking for resources, we help them connect to those. But even when we connect them to resources, we follow up and call them back when it's good for them. And what we find is they like to be able to have somebody to talk to about it. Did you go see someone? Did you get help? I did. Okay, how'd that go? Did it go okay? Are you doing better? Are you feeling better? Is it helping? And what else is going on? Because more, as we all know, more often than not, it's more than one thing going on in your life at any one time. There's a lot of stressors out there, and oftentimes I say, we kind of break it down from a fire hose of things going on in your life to a garden hose. Let's talk about one or two things at a time here. What's challenging them the most for you right now, and let's work on that together. And we stay on the journey as long as they want. As long as they want. So, and our goal is resilience and well-being and wellness, and we just want them to get back on track and be able to thrive again.
And just one more question about that, because I know it's important in terms of confidentiality, because of all, again, the stigma and all of that. They want to know what will the system know that I'm calling. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's confidential. It could be anonymous too. I mean, we don't even know if you're giving us your real name. I mean, that's, your name's, we like to know your name. It's important, but what's important is we're helping. We're there to help you. So when you call, we had a person call one time, and then he wanted to talk to the boss. So they transferred the call into me, and usually, I'm like, uh-oh. And he said, I wanted to talk to someone I didn't know and I was never going to meet. And he said, knowing that your line is confidential made all the difference for me, that I could talk to somebody live and confidentially, and that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So we don't get funding from DOD. We don't get funding from the VA. So we're separate from that. So we don't share your information with anyone else. It's confidential. It stays with us. Perfect. And that's very important, because people need a place they can call and trust and know that they can say whatever they want, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Well, let's end with a smile. Tell me about your grandkids.
Thanks.
Is it better than having kids? I've heard that, because you don't have all the responsibility.
It's just pure joy. Grandchildren are just pure joy. And Carol is gone. She left today to go over to New York to be with the kids, and I'll join them tomorrow. So we spend time as much as we can. But they are, our oldest grandchild is Beckett. Beckett Lee. Our grandson's name is Graham James. Okay. And our youngest grandchild is Cassidy Bell. So we have 3 wonderful grandchildren. Of course, as typical grandparents, you think yours are the brightest, and that's the way it should be. So being a grandparent's wonderful, and we thoroughly enjoy it. And we enjoy getting to see our daughter Melanie be a mom, and our son-in-law Joe get to be a dad, and they're wonderful parents. And
it's good to see. I'm sure it's very rewarding to see your values, and you look at them as okay, you model them as parents, right? And you look at them and say, oh, that's what I used to do. That's what Carol used to do.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see when they get to a point, because you can almost see, okay, I see what you're going through raising us. I get it now, and so it's it really is just joy. I mean, we just love being around the grandkids. It's also nice to give them a break so they can
Oh, yeah.
go out and have a date night or whatever and get some time together because it's tough. They both work and they, time is valuable. And I remember our son-in-law Joe said after they had Beckett, shortly after they had Beckett, we were over their apartment in New York, and he looked at me and he goes, "I'm not sure what we did with all of our time before we had her." I mean, I think we can all relate to that,
I'm sure you have a sense of, did I just waste all my time? Because I don't even remember what I did before.
I know before kids, what'd you do with all that time?
Yeah,
So no, it's great. They're wonderful parents, and
yeah.
we're proud of them and all they're doing. And
What's your favorite activity to do with the kids?
I like them
You
all.
have a favorite, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I have a favorite. We like to read to them, and they.
Uh-huh.
But I think part of a favorite is when their imaginations and are doing things, we just go along with them, and I think
Yeah.
that's so fun to see their minds just come up with ideas and they'll say, we want to do that. Okay, let's do that.
You
Or,
join in.
this is a train. Jump on the train. It's just a bunch of pillows, and you jump on the train with them, and they have so much fun doing it. And
They need so little, don't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
they're wonderful. They grow up so fast. It's hard to believe how they are already.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time, for all the service you've done for this country and you still do for your community. Send my love to your family. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Paula, and my best to you and everyone else out there listening or watching. Please be gentle to yourself and each other. Thank you all, and for each and every one of you. I'm so sorry for your loss.